I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thank you for joining me. This is your reality news check. Today is Friday, the 16th of December, 2011. We're going to begin with some news for you of U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. He's got your back, folks. Yes, he is. He's working like a dog to protect your right to go to the polls. And get this, here's a new concept in America, the democracy, to vote and not get turned away. We'll tell you about it. Plus, the U.S. Census shows 1 in 2 people are poor or low income. Then she faces prison time for trying to enlarge a man's penis. And 170 people found dead in India from moonshine. And then, folks, all is not well and quiet in China. Can you say protest? Oh, yeah. Okay, in the race for the presidency 2012, because we know it's going to greatly impact that, Attorney General Eric Holder, he's beginning an examination into several recently enacted state laws. Those laws determine what is considered verifiable identification at the polls. In other words, what can they use to turn you away at the polls so you can't vote? That's right, folks. He's got your back. Pay attention. Holder made an announcement about his intentions at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library and Museum, which is in Austin, Texas. Now, you remember that in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. Johnson declared, and I quote, "The right to vote is the basic right without which all others are meaningless." Get it? So if you keep people from voting, you've taken everything else from them. Please pay attention. That law was signed to combat very strong resistance in the southern states here in the United States, where the goal was to keep blacks from voting. That's right. Because of the 1965 voting rights law here in America, no one can discriminate against voters based on race, by using poll taxes or literacy tests. And because the voting problems were so serious, the law included a requirement that the Justice Department review any proposed changes to voting procedures to judge if they would be discriminatory. Now, this requirement is called pre-clearance. Pardon me. Before a covered jurisdiction can make a change to the voting laws, it has to receive pre-clearance either from the Attorney General of the United States or from the District Court of the District of Columbia. In order to obtain this permission, the state has to prove that the new law does not discriminate between voters based on race or color, and that it was not enacted for such a purpose, i.e. to be discriminatory. Now, this also includes language minorities. We're talking about people who speak another language. It's for example, Spanish, okay? So they can't be discriminated against either. Now, right now, these are the states that are subject to pre-clearance. Alabama, no shock there. Alaska, no shock there. Arizona, no shock there. Why are these the most egregious states? Georgia, except for the city of Sandy Springs. Louisiana, where they took all those people after Hurricane Katrina and moved them to other states, just got them right out of the mix, all those people of color. Mississippi, no shock there, Haley Barber. South Carolina, no shock there with their Confederate flag, all right. And Texas, no shock there, Rick Perry. And then Virginia, except for 14 counties and 4 independent cities. And I'll just quickly name the independent cities: Fairfax, Harrisonburg, Salem, and Winchester. All right, of these 9 states that I mentioned, 4 have passed laws already requiring voters to show state-issued IDs at the polls, if you can get one. The Attorney General believes that these changes are deliberate attempts by a Republican majority in the state legislature to disenfranchise minority voters. Go, Eric Holder. Stand behind him, folks. He's got our back. Now, let's go to some other news. If this is the greatest country in the world, then I got to tell you something, folks. The world is really in trouble. Okay? According to the U.S. Census, nearly 1 in 2 Americans are poor or low income. Thank the Republicans for that. It's due to years of stagnating wages for the middle class. And here's what Sheldon Danziger says. He's a University of Michigan public policy professor who specializes in poverty. Here's what he says, quote, "The reality is that prospects for the poor and the near poor are dismal." Yeah. He also says, if Congress and the states make further cuts, we can expect the number of poor and low-income families to rise for the next several years, unquote. That's what he says. Meanwhile, on the conservative side, Robert Rector, who's a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, he's questioning whether some people classified as poor or low income really are suffering at all. He questions if they suffer material hardship. Yeah, folks, can you believe this man's got gall? All right, he says, some people described as poor folks They actually live in decent-sized homes. Yes, he does say that. He says they drive cars, and they own widescreen TVs. So let me just examine that for a minute. This is how ridiculous he is. Okay, what is a decent-sized house? First, let's start with the fact that we are not saying that someone who lives in a mansion, is that a decent-sized house? I guess so if you got a family of 20. So who are you to tell people what is a decent-sized house? Because people manage to pay off their house and keep shelter over their head. All right, let's talk about the fact that they shouldn't drive cars. Well, how are they going to get to work? Because you know you Republicans have taken the bus service everywhere you could. All right, and what about the fact that they own a widescreen TV? Hey, well, let me ask you this, Mr. Heritage Foundation. All of your rich buddies who have either sold them the televisions or manufactured the televisions or somehow financed the televisions with horrible interest rates, how come you didn't look at that person and say, you know, I think you're poor, I'm not going to sell you a TV? You didn't do that. You make money off their back, and then you criticize them. So this is wrong again, and this is the Republican way. All right. So you should know this, that the mayors in 29 cities say more than 1 in 4 people who need emergency food assistance, guess what? They didn't get it. That's right, folks. We want you to know that most of the poor are in the South and West, including Arizona, New Mexico, and South Carolina. These are states that have scaled back or eliminated aid programs for the needy. Eliminated, folks. Eliminated. Got rid of them. Not going to help them at all. The majority of low-income families, 62%, spend more than 1/3 of their earnings on housing, way more than what is considered affordable. And all the rich people who own all of the housing complexes, are you going to lower anybody's rent? No. So be quiet. In other news, a New Jersey woman faces manslaughter charges because she tried to enlarge a man's penis, and guess what, folks? He died. Yes. Her name is Cassia Rivera, 34. Apparently, this is what the police say. They say she injected silicone into the penis of Justin Street. He's 22, and she did it at her East Orange home. What was he thinking? Needless to say, Street died from a silicone embolism 1 day later. Police are now asking other victims to come forward. Then let's go to Poughkeepsie, New York, where a high school English teacher is accused of violently stabbing a fellow teacher with a screwdriver. Once again, we need to raise the wages of educators so we can get the riffraff out of the school system. Why did she do it? It was all reportedly over a disagreement about a meeting. Who was stabbed? Well, according to police, Cynthia Glozier, who's 54, and also an English teacher at Poughkeepsie High School. She was stabbed 16 times, police say, by Ronette Ricketts, who's 40. Now, both of these women are old enough, they're definitely old enough to be somebody's mother, and in some cases, somebody's grandmother. Apparently, Glozier was stabbed 11 times in the back and several more times in the head, chest, shoulder, and neck. After the stabbing, a student there said there was, quote, blood all over the floor. That is so pathetic. All right, in international news from China, folks, where all is not well, in the southern fishing village of Wuhan, there are lots of protests going on, folks. The residents are mad because they say the government officials sold farmland to developers without their consent. Wuhan village is among China's most economically developed, pushing up land prices, of course. Wuhan residents have put up barricades to keep police out of their town, and almost every day, thousands of villagers, folks, in a town of only 20,000, gather for rallies. They're shouting slogans for the return of their land, and apparently they are pumping their fist in the air, which we know is not going on in China. Okay, we know that Chinese have to be upset about that. In China, folks, that's right, folks, occupy, occupy, occupy. Today, 7,000 people showed up for the funeral of a man who died suspiciously in police custody. And then finally, folks, from India, where 170 people are dead from drinking moonshine. It was bootleg alcohol mixed with toxic ethanol. Police raided illegal distilleries. They dismantled equipment, but 12 people they put under arrest, but they say they still do not have the kingpin in custody. All right, apparently once the victims drank the moonshine, they began vomiting, they suffered piercing headaches, and they started frothing at the mouth before dying. At least 90 people, some in critical condition, were treated at a local hospital in Diamond Harbor Village. Dozens more taken to hospitals in the nearby capital, Kolkata, formerly known, as you know, as Calcutta. Illegal liquor operations apparently are flourishing in India's urban slums and among the rural poor, and despite the fact that there are religious and cultural taboos about drinking among Indians, we should tell you that 5%, roughly 60 million people, are alcoholics there in India. That's reported. They are alcoholics. 2/3 of the alcohol consumed in the country, though, is illegal. Those, folks, are your stories. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you Monday, same time, same place. News Stories. Have a great weekend.